Welcome to True Tears Stories. Please like this video and subscribe to True Tears Stories. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The first thing Connor noticed wasn't the sound of drawers opening or suitcases unzipping. It was the stillness. That thick, oppressive kind that falls when someone's already made up their mind. He stepped into the bedroom quietly, the scent of her perfume hanging in the air like a stubborn ghost. Elise didn't look up as she folded another blouse into the open suitcase on the bed. The wheels of her second bag were already tucked against the dresser, half packed with shoes. "You're going somewhere?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She sighed, just loud enough to be heard. Not long. Just enough to communicate that she didn't want to explain. "I need time," she said, smoothing the shirt flat with her palm. "Space! A reset!" Connor stood still. "From me?" She didn't answer, just zipped the bag part way and turned toward her jewelry box. "I didn't even know we were at the edge of something." "That's the problem," she said sharply. "You never know. You're passive, Connor. Always waiting, always reacting. I need someone who decides." He stepped closer. "So you're leaving because I'm calm?" Elise tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Don't twist this. I'm not doing this for drama. I just need more." "And you? You've been content to just coast." He wanted to ask coast through what? The house they worked for? The late nights he stayed up finishing reports while she scrolled through vacations they couldn't afford? The years of small sacrifices? But the words didn't come. They never did fast enough for her. She paused at the door, keys in hand, purse on her shoulder. "You want to keep your pride?" she said, not unkindly, just blunt, like always. "Be a man about this." Then she was gone. Connor stood in the echo she left behind. The silence wasn't clean. It buzzed. It itched. It reminded him of how many times he'd let things slide because keeping the peace seemed better than picking a fight. Elise liked things decisive, sharper edged. She said indecision was weakness. Be a man. What did that even mean to her? It had started months ago, maybe longer. The strange late returns from her networking events, the new perfume, the phone always upside down on the table. When he'd asked, she said she was just protecting her peace. He believed her. Or maybe he just didn't want the answer. Now, standing in the hallway, surrounded by open closets and forgotten slippers, Connor felt the absence like a cold wind blowing through a door he hadn't realized was open. He didn't call her. He didn't follow. Instead, he walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where they kept receipts. Years of dinners, joint expenses, and travel bookings. He began sorting through them, not out of suspicion at first, just out of a desperate need to see something. Anything. The charges started to tell a story. Hotel stays that didn't align with her work trips. Uber rides from neighborhoods she'd never mentioned. A spa weekend, she told him, was a business seminar. One receipt caught his eye. A luxury boutique charged for nearly $3,000. He remembered asking her about it. It was a gift, she had said then, for a client, an investor's wife. He had nodded. Now he realized. She never said whose card she used. The silence of the house started to shift. Not louder, just clearer. Not empty, honest. He sat down at the kitchen table with the receipts spread out like puzzle pieces and began to sort the truth she'd never said aloud. The receipts kept him up until nearly 2 o'clock a.m. Connor didn't consider himself a suspicious man. He preferred giving people space, the benefit of the doubt. But each glossy slip of paper in front of him was a breadcrumb, one he hadn't placed. A week ago, Elise had said she wanted clarity, a life that felt alive again. But the clarity, Connor now realized, was already sitting quietly in their drawers, on their statements, in the timestamps she didn't think he would read. He opened her email account. They had once shared everything: passwords, calendars, playlists. That stopped sometime last fall, but the logins had never changed. Her inbox was clean, too clean. But he found the folder labeled Archived Travel, and there it was. To Elise C. Ramsey. Subject: Reservation Confirmation. Del Mar Beach Resort. Dates: July 14th, 17. Room: Ocean Suite. 2 guests. Connor sat back in the chair. That weekend, he'd been home with a stomach flu. Elise said she was flying to Chicago for a conference. He'd ordered soup and spent most of the weekend sleeping through fevers. She hadn't texted much. Now, he could picture it, her barefoot on a hotel balcony, sipping wine beside someone who wasn't him. He opened her Venmo, scrolled. Dinner, 172. Thanks for last night. Not to him. The pieces weren't big, but they didn't need to be. They stacked one after the other, not like evidence for court. Just proof for himself that his silence wasn't kindness, that it had become complicity. That's what she meant when she said, "Be a man." Stop pretending nothing's happening. He opened his own laptop and typed 2 words into the search bar: divorce attorney. He chose a firm 2 cities over, somewhere with no overlap, no friends in common. The assistant on the phone had a kind voice. She didn't ask why, just booked the consultation and told him to bring whatever he had. Receipts, dates, anything that mattered. Connor hung up and stared at the wall. Then he walked into their bedroom and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. Inside, a velvet box from the same boutique as the $3,000 charge. He opened it slowly. A watch, men's, engraved. Your silence is everything. He didn't recognize the brand. He didn't need to. Connor sat on the edge of the bed with the box in his hand. She hadn't cheated with lust. She'd cheated with certainty, that he would never do anything about it, that he would sit there, hurt but silent. Because he was good, because he was stable, because she thought he was too soft to ever let go. That night, he didn't cry. He wrote a list. Things he needed to close, accounts to separate, subscriptions tied to their shared name, items he'd paid for, names on leases. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. The next morning, he wore a black button-up shirt and took the watch box to the lawyer's office. He slid it across the desk when the assistant asked for any supporting materials. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rhea, nodded as she took it in. "She gave this to someone else?" she asked. Connor nodded. "Using my card?" Rhea took notes. "We'll include it." As she walked him through the draft petition, Connor felt strangely calm, like organizing debris after a storm. He asked questions, listened, read everything twice, signed nothing until he understood. When it was time to finalize the packet, Rhea asked how he wanted it delivered. "She's coming by next week," he said, "to pick up the last of her stuff." Rhea looked at him. "You want to give it to her yourself?" Connor nodded. "Are you sure?" He paused. Then, "Yeah. I'd suggest something civil, straightforward, no surprises." Connor gave a half smile. There'll be a bow on it. The night before she was due to return, Connor didn't clean the house. He didn't cook, didn't prepare anything poetic. He didn't stand in front of a mirror rehearsing what to say. He had already said everything he needed to, for years, in the spaces between Elise's monologues, in the silence he gave her, in the steadiness she interpreted as smallness. The divorce packet sat in the middle of the dining table, neatly stacked, signed, and sealed in a crisp white envelope. He tied a thin burgundy ribbon around it, her favorite color, soft satin, tied loosely with a small bow. Not dramatic, just enough to say, "I saw what you needed, and I gave it to you." When Elise walked in the next day, she wore sunglasses despite the gray sky. She moved through the house like she still owned the walls, her heels quiet on the hardwood. "Just here for the rest of my stuff," she said, without looking at him. He nodded, stepping back. There wasn't much, just a few toiletries, a box of sweaters, a pair of boots she'd left in the closet. She moved quickly, efficient. "Did you forward my mail yet?" she asked. "I put in the request yesterday," he replied. "It'll redirect within a week." She looked around the living room once more. "You'll need new art," she said, gesturing to the blank spaces on the wall where her pieces had hung. He didn't respond. As she walked toward the door, she saw the envelope. She paused, confused. "What's this?" Connor met her eyes. "Everything you asked for." She hesitated, fingers hovering over the ribbon. You filed?" "I did." She picked it up slowly, as if it might be a trick. "You could have had it delivered. I wanted you to know I wasn't afraid to say yes this time." Elise let out a faint laugh. "So that's what this is? Some kind of performance?" "No," he said. "It's closure, dignified, tied with a bow." She stared at him for a long time, and for once, she didn't look superior or smug. She looked uncertain. "Is this supposed to make me feel guilty?" she asked. "No," Connor said quietly. "It's supposed to make me feel finished." She didn't speak again. She walked to the door, turned back once, like she might say something, but didn't. Then she left. Connor stood in the entryway, watching the spot she'd stood in moments before. The house was quiet, still, but this time, it didn't ache. He turned to the windows, pulled them open, let fresh air in. The envelope was gone, but his voice, the one he'd buried under years of good intentions, had finally spoken. Not in rage, not in regret, in release. For days after Elise left, the house stayed quiet, but not in the haunted way Connor had feared. It was quieter, like a room exhaling after holding its breath too long. The first morning alone, he made coffee and didn't set out a second cup. He sat by the window and drank it slowly, not because he was sad, but because there was no one rushing him anymore. No sharp comments, no cold glances over a phone screen. Just him, and it was enough. The divorce paperwork moved quickly. Elise didn't contest anything. Ria said she signed almost immediately. No edits, no additions, no drama. "She's not used to losing control," Ria had said. "That silence you handed her, it said everything." Connor didn't think of it as silence. It was a boundary. He spent his evenings differently now. Books he never finished were reopened. Music filled the kitchen again. Actual music, not just whatever Elise called focus playlists. He laughed at things more easily. Not because life was suddenly perfect, but because it finally felt honest. One afternoon, while clearing out the garage, he found an old box Elise had never unpacked. Inside, a framed photo of their wedding day. The smiles in the picture looked too wide, almost strained. He remembered how tight his collar felt, how Elise had told him that morning, "Don't cry, it'll ruin the pictures." He didn't keep the photo. Instead, he found a small corkboard and pinned a note to it. One of his own. He wrote, "Being a man doesn't mean staying quiet to keep the peace. It means knowing when to end the war inside your own walls." He didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Elise. Not to the court. Not even to himself. Just to the life he was finally ready to live, with no bow required. The weekend came, and with it, sunlight that felt a little warmer through the windows. Connor stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping coffee in his favorite chipped mug, the one Elise always said didn't match anything. Now, everything matched just fine. He'd returned the last of her things through her lawyer. There were no dramatic texts, no last-minute pleas. Just the absence of noise. Freedom didn't arrive with fireworks. It showed up in subtler ways. In a quiet morning with no tension. In the decision to rearrange the furniture because he wanted to. In realizing he no longer second-guessed himself before speaking out loud. He did speak, aloud to himself, sometimes just to hear his own voice. It didn't sound like a whisper anymore. It sounded full, steady. That evening, he started a new journal. Not the kind filled with plans or lists or what-ifs, but a blank one. For ideas, for goals, for remembering who he'd been before he built his life around someone else's expectations. His first entry was short. "I didn't lose her. I released her. And in doing that, I found me." He closed the notebook and let the room settle. A peaceful kind of silence. Outside, the wind nudged the branches. The sun slipped behind the skyline, casting the whole living room in soft gold. Connor didn't feel like someone who'd been left. He felt like someone who finally stood up, quietly, and let the door close behind him, by choice. And sometimes, that's exactly what strength looks like.